Here we go. Hot topic seminar on legal highs. These were some of the questions I was asked to cover. Of course, you can't cover all these in 30 minutes. So what I'm going to focus on probably are what are legal highs, what are their effects, what are some of the main risks and harms, why are they used and who are they used by. I can only kind of touch on some of this, some of the research that's been done. The research about legal highs is not extensive and it's scattered all over the place. But what I will focus on is how prevalent it is at the moment. There's a lot of, if we go by what the papers and the media tell us, we would think everybody's taking Ivory Wave and whatever the flavour of the week is, GBL, I think, at the moment again. But we'll actually see that what prevalence studies have been done show a very different picture about which legal highs are popular. And it's changing all the time. What effect does banning have on their use risks? Might not have time to cover that today. But I will try and look at a more concrete aspect to finish off, which is how should health and helping services respond to users of these new drugs. And really, I haven't got all the answers, but I'll give a few things that I've come up with doing the research. Okay, well, why have legal highs become so popular over the last 5 years? Well, it's not because of the price. Most illegal drugs are cheaper than they were 20 years ago. Some legal highs can actually cost more. You know, like black mamba, you know, I can get a bag of skunk in Liverpool for 25 quid, but 3 grams of black mamba will cost you 30 quid, unless you get it on the internet and you buy it in its pure form. Black mamba contains a cannabinoid called AM2201. You can actually buy the powder on an internet and smoke the powder yourself or make up your own herbal mixtures. That works out a bit cheaper if you're thinking of having a black mamba habit. The main reasons seem to be, firstly, and this I wrote a paper with Fiona Meecham in Drug and Alcohol Today a couple of years ago, and we hypothesized that the main reasons for this outbreak of legal high use was that there's this drop in the purity of several popular drugs. I'll show you that next. Secondly, there's a drop in availability of some popular drugs. They became less available, particularly ecstasy. It turned into all sorts of things, although recently MDMA is appearing in ecstasy again. But for a while it didn't, so people turn to other sources. Thirdly, the advent of the internet and head shops as new ways of buying psychoactive drugs cannot be underestimated. Lots of people get their drugs off the internet now. And fourthly, we've got entrepreneurs in this new business Britain who are prepared to research, produce and market many new legal substances for getting high, including my MP's son, Sean Ellman, who was behind one of our most famous chain stores, I think the only big chain store for legal highs. This is their bag. It's called Herman's, Dr. Herman's, and they've got branches in Chester, Manchester, Warrington. Ooh, Warrington, you can nip out at lunchtime. Leeds and Liverpool. And Dr. Herman's given me a lot of my information about what's going on. I go in there and I question them heavily about what's happening. They get so fed up in the end, they give me free samples to make me leave. Annual trends in average purity of drugs. Here, this is from the government's figures. And you can see, look at the purity of crack. I mean, my God, it went down from 70% in 2003 to 32% pure in 2010-11. Same with cocaine. Average purity of cocaine seized by the police in England and Wales dropped from over 50% in 2003 right down to 28% in the latest year. Amphetamine has always been shit. It's just always been weak. It couldn't really go any further, but it did. It managed to drop down from about 10% to 9%. You know, it didn't want to be left out. And as you can see, I've even put heroin on there. Now, heroin's purity hasn't changed that much. It's bloody addictive, so you cannot mess with the purity too much. It has to stay between about 25 and 50%, you know, or the users aren't going to get a very good hit off it. So because heroin's so addictive, I think that's the reason its purity stays more level. Right, this is from The Sun last week. So what's a legal high? Legal highs wrecked our lives, says this poor girl. Now, it's always a tragedy when a young person dies on drugs, and that's not my point here. This is from The Sun last week, May the 8th, is it? Something like that, May? Let's see it further from the back. It was last week, that'll do. And here they go. They're going on about legal highs wrecking the lives of party girls. And the party drug they're talking about is GBL. GBL isn't a legal high anymore. GBL was banned in December 2009. So what is a legal high then? We need a definition of a legal high. There's a lot of confusion in the terminology. And I would say, unfortunately, it's a two-part definition, and this is possibly, for me, my best working definition of a legal high. Firstly, it has to be a chemical or a device. Electronic legal highs will be coming soon, brain tuners. A chemical or device which alters the functioning of brain neurotransmitters and brain waves and thus produces changes in our experience and behaviour. That covers any drug or any high. But then the second bit, which makes it a legal high as opposed to a controlled drug, is that firstly, it won't be controlled by the Misuse of Drugs Act. Secondly, it won't be licensed for legal use like alcohol and tobacco are. That's why we don't call alcohol and tobacco legal highs, because they're licensed. And secondly, it's not advertised or sold and therefore not regulated as a medicine. And this is how they get away with it with the legal highs sales. They say it's not a medicine, it's not for human consumption. And by saying that, they're allowed to sell them as legal highs. And as we know, European governments are doing all they can to get around this loophole. Also, and lots of legal high definers also add this, that a legal high is a drug which will mimic the effect of popular controlled drugs. Well, since popular controlled drugs do just about everything, then legal highs are basically things which mimic any old drug. So I really can't see the point of adding that bit, but there you go. So in short, a legal high is a substance which is not legally regulated. And I would say a more accurate term would be legal loophole drugs. Well, nobody listens to me, so nobody's going to do that. What makes a drug a medicine? So why isn't a legal high a medicine? Well, the classification of drug products as medicines is made on a case-by-case basis by the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency under the Medicines Act 1968 and the amended Medicines for Human Use Regulations 94. Medicines are also classified into Schedules 1 to 5, both under the Medicines Act and the Misuse of Drugs Act, and this determines the controls of prescribing and dispensing. For instance, if you're in Schedule 1, that's a drug that can't be prescribed or dispensed. Most hallucinogens are in Schedule 1 because they have no medical use, so they put them in Schedule 1. On the other hand, Schedule 5 drugs can be dispensed without a prescription. Schedule 2, 3 and 4 involve various levels of rules about prescribing and dispensing. So what are they? What are legal highs? Well, gone a bit out of sync here, but there we go. They're advertised use, for basically they're not for human consumption. A legal high will be a drug that is advertised as not for human consumption. That's the way they get around the Medicines Act. If they say it's for human consumption, they're breaking the law. So if you go into any legal high shop and say, hello, my good man, I'd like a packet of 10 quid's worth of black Mamba. He'll say, certainly, sir, here you are. And you'll say, how do I use it? You'll say, it's incense. You might find you'll need about 10% of that to have a good smell of incense. And this is the kind of things they'll actually say to you in legal high shops. They'll talk about all sorts of other things apart from the fact that it's a drug. So because of this legislation, legal high shops cannot give information about how to use the product safely. Because if they did, they'd be breaking the Medicines Act. They'd be saying they're giving you a medicine. It comes in different forms too. You can have liquid, gas or solid drugs. Most legal highs seem to be under this solid thing here. They're powders, pills, capsules or organic material. But some of them, as we'll see, are gases, nitrous oxide or liquids. What are their sources? Well, their sources can actually be herbal, animal or technological. Herbal ones are anything from a plant, leaf, buds, roots, seeds. We'll come to some of those. Even animals are used to make some drugs. Their excretions, like the cane toad excretes a slime containing bufotenin. And then there's the technological sources of legal highs, mainly synthetic chemicals. But I think in the future, we're going to see electronic devices more, things called brain tuners. Put electrodes to your brain, stick in a disc in your computer, set it to sedative, trip or stimulants, and off you go. And we might think that was 20 years away. I'd say it's about 2 years away. What are the main groups of legal highs? Well, to make it all very, very simple before I get to the complicated bits, a recent study by CMCDG and Europol in the annual report on the implementation of council decision, blah, 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 they put them into 5 main groups. They said most legal highs can be placed into groups which are mimicking these groups of drugs. Phenethylamines, the main illegal examples are ecstasy and amphetamines. So lots of legal highs are trying to mimic the effects of phenethylamines. The second group is tryptamines. That's legal highs that try to mimic LSD, silicon from magic mushrooms or DMT. Piperazines, ecstasy and amphetamines again. Cathinones, the famous mephedrone example, which tries to mimic the effects of amphetamines and cocaine. And fifthly, and most recently, cannabinoids. Cannabis contains THC, and there are lots of simulated versions of these synthetic cannabinoids appearing now, one of the most popular groups of legal highs. There's also a miscellaneous group with all the other ones in that don't fit in the first 5 categories. What were the top legal highs, 2010 to 2012? Well, this is based on my kind of gloss on a lot of research and speaking to legal high users and guys who run legal high shops. And I would say across 2010 and 11, laughing gas, nitrous oxide, you can get them on the net. They're called cream dispensers, and you send off of them, and you get these little canisters called whippets. You put that into a cream dispenser, stick a balloon on the other end, don't stick any cream in it, and the gas will fill up the balloon, and then you then inhale the balloon, and you have a laugh, and you have some strange experiences for a couple of minutes. I'll come back to that in a minute, and you'll see why. Secondly, Ivory Wave's getting a lot of attention, but the prevalence studies are so few and far between, it's hard to know how to rank all of these. Sparkle is another popular one in Liverpool, methylene dioxyaminoindane, or MDAI. Feel free to come up and look at all these here. All the packages for these drugs are all on here somewhere. There's Sparkle. It just has a little capsule in it that you can swallow, or you can pour it out and sniff it and inject it if you should so wish. Benzofury, another popular legal high at the moment. A lot of these are available on the internet too. I'm not going to say all the chemical names. And whack. Whack is quite popular because it's a kind of legal high version of cocaine. And then across the last couple of years, we've seen synthetic cannabinoids rising up much more. There are loads of different types of synthetic cannabinoids now. I mean, just down on Bold Street in Liverpool, to Dr. Herman's, you can buy the Black Mamba, you can buy Doob, you can buy Zulu incense, it says, but of course these are all inert herbal materials with synthetic cannabinoids soaked into them. The original one was spice and it got banned, but the legal high makers just keep tweaking the chemical and making it a legal version. Methoxetamine, you'll have heard a lot about that recently. That's one of the first ones that the government's had its eye on. And methiopropamine, MPA, is also popular, as is ethylphenidate. Herbal highs, the distinction here is that herbal high is basically a drug which is a natural substance. It's not made synthetically, and they're generally smoked, chewed, or made into a brew and drunk. Cat's the best example. Although legal highs tend not to sell cat, you tend to get cat sold from grocers in ethnic areas. It would be a good example of a herbal high, but the most common head shop herbal high is probably Salvia divinorum, which you can buy loose in condensed forms. Lots of different bags here saying, this one says 50 times normal strength and so forth, and or you can buy them in ready rolled joints, already rolled up, if you can't be bothered to roll your own. Black Mamba, this is the one that's really popular, and I think surveys are underestimating just how popular Black Mamba is becoming. That one was from the USA, San Francisco. In Britain, it tends to be packaged in these little green packages, although it does come in different forms from different manufacturers. And it's basically just an herbal green material like this. This is wild opium lettuce, you know. You wouldn't want to smoke it, it doesn't do much. So legal high shops mainly, this was all they sold once, stuff that didn't do anything. So now what they're doing is soaking synthetic drugs into inert herbal materials and selling them as smoking mixtures. So they have cannabis-like effects. The only problem is if you smoke a little bit too much of them, they become very hallucinogenic, far more than cannabis. So the other group of legal highs are the synthetic highs. Now they are mainly white powders compressed into tablets, or white powders put into capsules. And that would explain what most of the synthetic highs are. WW Bulk Research Chemicals have been very helpful. There's a chap there who goes by the name of Harry, who, if you call him up, will give you lots of useful information, particularly if you're buying stuff off him. This is some of their main bestsellers at the moment. Benzofury. Note the use of the terms research chemical. Yeah, it's not a medicine, it's a research chemical, and it's not a pill, it's a pellet. Just to make it clear that this is not a drug, it's not for human consumption, it can only be sold to adults, and it's harmful. So they couldn't go further out of their way to say it's not a medicine, but they're selling it you as a drug. It's a game that's being played to get around the law. This legal high has been around for ages. Anyone had that? Anyone used to be a student? It's a legal high, isn't it? It's caffeine. You get them in tablets. They sell them at the chemist just down the road from me. And pure tablets of the legal stimulant, as caffeine is known, trimethylxanthine. Sounds a lot better than caffeine, doesn't it? Makes it more sound like a drug. And that's sold in pharmacies off the shelf. So, we already have a tradition of selling people legal highs in Britain. It's just head shops have extended it a little bit further. Bulk Research Chemicals are one of the main websites that do sell genuine legal highs if you're interested in research purposes in exploring these things. They're also selling a lot of ethylphenidate at the moment, they tell me. Harry, I don't know if it's his real name, but he sounds like a Harry. And ethylphenidate is actually an analogue of the stimulant drug methylphenidate, better known as Ritalin. So it's basically a kind of pseudoamphetamine. Again, loophole in the law allows them to sell it. Ivory Wave, very popular at the moment, especially in the press. They like to go on about Ivory Wave a lot. But again, little evidence about how common it is. That's sold as soothing bath salts. So incense and soothing bath salts. Now, The Sun, last year, I thought I wanted a quote from an authoritative journal. So The Sun last week said that the legal highs are still for sale in this country now. They reckon a Mary Joy at £10 a gram. I haven't come across that one. He-Man, I love this one, 63 quid for 2 half-gram sachets, reported to be the new methoxetamine, and it's named after the cartoon character. It makes users feel like masters of the universe. Publicity, eh? Side effects include loss of balance and hallucinations. Sounds great fun. MPA I've already mentioned. It's supposed to emulate methoxetamine, which is now being brought under stricter control. And then Doves, named after ecstasy, and anything can be in these pills. And research shows it can change from week to week and month to month, the kind of chemicals that turn up in these things. So what are the best terms to use? Well, I think ideally we could just talk about new psychoactive drugs and substances, because legal highs is a term that's starting to get confusing, because when they get banned, they're no longer legal highs, but they still get called that. Some journals tend to prefer novel, unregulated compounds. Herbal highs and synthetic highs is another distinction. Unauthorized medicines is what medical journals like to call them. Back in the 70s, they used to be called designer drugs. That's a term that's gone out of fashion, but of course the head shop euphemisms are the best. If you go into any head shop, they'll tell you that all they can sell you is bath salts, pond cleaner, room odorizer, incense, souvenirs, and research chemicals. And if you want to remember room odorizer, that's another one of our oldest legal highs. Poppers. It's been around since I was a kid, so that's bloody old, that is. What's happened to all these things? Well, over the years, lots of them have been banned, all these legal highs. The government eventually catches up with them. GHB banned in 2003. Magic mushrooms were totally banned in 2005, live and fresh as well as dried. Ketamine they banned in 2005. GBL, BZP, and some synthetic cannabinoids were banned in December 2009. And then the latest bans were methadone and its cathinone cousins in April 2010, and then nafarone, which they left off the list by accident and added on a few months later. TCDOs, this is the big problem. Are these TCDOs going to work? The government introduced these temporary class drug orders under an amendment to the Misuse of Drugs Act. It's originally under the Police Reform and Social Responsibility Act, but it actually becomes like a Class D or a Class X, some people call it, in the Misuse of Drugs Act. And the Home Office can place a drug in a temporary class if the ACMD advise that it is or is likely to be misused, and it has or could have harmful effects, and that a fast response is required to protect the public. It covers all Misuse of Drugs Act offences for 12 months, except possession. So under these laws, you can still possess these drugs, but you can't make or sell them, though the police can still confiscate them off you, even though it's legal to possess them. It's getting really confusing, this, isn't it? The penalties are the same as for Class BC drugs, maximum 14 years imprisonment. In the first 6 months since they introduced these TCDOs, just one new drug has been placed under a TCDO, methoxetamine. So 6 months into this law being invented, only methoxetamine has found its way under a TCDO. Interestingly, the AKPO position on TCDOs, this is a submission from AKPO to the Home Affairs Select Committee on Drugs Policy, 2nd of April this year. The AKPO have said the solution to the particular challenge of legal highs does not lie in adding inexorably to the list of illicit substances. Sounds like a drug policy reform group, doesn't it? It's AKPO. A key question for the government to determine is the extent to which legislation can realistically be used to address active choices being made by people and to tackle the undoubted harms caused by the misuse of substances taken essentially for pleasure. It almost sounds to me as if AKPO are fed up with this whole business of legal highs and don't want to waste any more time on it. Look at the last statement they made to the government. The police will continue to focus their energies on serious criminality and will take a less robust enforcement approach on matters relating to personal possession. So AKPO have also warned the government that the banning of legal drugs will fail and that forces will treat anyone found with them leniently, cautioning them instead of prosecuting them. There's a head shop earlier today on Bowl Street. They've now blotted out the legal highs bit, by the way, because that could get them into trouble with the law. There's a head shop in Ireland. Look a bit like coffee shops in Amsterdam, don't they? Same kind of look to them. What are the sources of legal highs? Well, interestingly, a Mixmag survey found that nearly all legal high users were getting some of their sources from their friends. After that, it was websites, and head shops came third, festival stalls fourth, drug dealers fifth. What do you reckon he took? These are the facial effects of stimulants or ampathogen drugs. This is the kind of facial appearance of someone who's taking stimulant drugs. I haven't got time to go into all of it, but I think you get the picture. Whereas if you've taken a more sedative drug, legal high or not, you're going to look a bit more like that. That's the main difference in the effects from the face. It's fairly distinctive kind of facial appearances. Basically, though, all these legal highs fall into four groups. They can be stimulants or uppers, depressants or downers, hallucinogens or trips, or antipsychotics, which you might call normalizers, and mainly prescribed drugs, actually, for people with mental disorder. Most legal highs at the moment are falling in these two groups, stimulants and hallucinogens. But I think we're going to see more coming out in the depressant sedative group over the next year. What's the main reason for taking legal highs? Why the devil do people do this? Well, Mixmag asked their survey of 2,000 readers, and they said, firstly, because other illegal drugs weren't available. So it was due to a shortage of legal drugs more than anything else. Secondly, because they're not illegal. A lot of people just think, well, if it's not illegal, I'm not going to get busted. That's a good idea. You're able to buy them online, very young generation thing. More reliable product than illegal drugs. They're less adulterated. They're cheaper than illegal drugs, well, that's debatable. And they're better quality than legal drugs. That isn't debatable, they are. They're safer than illegal drugs as well, and a better high and fewer side effects. Those were the reasons given. The EU survey in June 2011, they surveyed 27 EU countries and found that the UK was ranked fourth for legal high use, and Ireland was first. And the UK also ranked top out of 27 countries for the proportion of legal high users who were offered them in clubs and parties. So Britain, again, leads the game on drug use. This is the latest, I can't go into all these figures, but the latest report from CMCDG said that 24 new legal highs were found in 2009, 41 in 2010, and 49 in 2011. So, in other words, about one new legal high a week is now appearing at the moment. I can't see how the ACMD is going to keep up with their TCDOs on all these. Online drug shops usually call their products either herbal highs or research chemicals. The CMCDG report found in January 2010 there were 170 online head shops. A year later, 314. 6 months later, 630. And 6 months later, January 2012, they counted 690 online head shops. That's how prevalent it's getting. But I just think it's interesting to know that if we look at the Mixmag survey, and this is for 2009 and 2010, the Clubbers Mag survey is a couple of thousand of its readers every year. And you'll see, in fact, the most popular legal highs aren't the one that the papers go on about. They're poppers and nitrous oxide. Poppers is a liquid, as you know, you sniff the fumes of. Nitrous oxide is a gas that you squirt into balloons and inhale. They were the most two popular legal highs in this survey. Then came methadone, salvia, BZP, spice, which is now banned, methadone, which is now banned, and GBL, which is now banned. And I guess I'll have to finish off really on the conclusions of Fiona Meecham. I think she was going to be here today, but she's ill. She's just done this study in 2011 where she interviewed lots of people in the Lancashire area about the legal high use, and she found that they're all starting to call it bubble. And she says, while bubble has been used as a slang term for methadone when it emerged in the Northwest, by late 2010, after the ban, bubble was evolving into a slang term for any synthetic legal high or unidentified white powder with stimulant effects which was available from street dealers. In other words, even the people who take the bloody drugs are confused about it now, so they're just calling any white powder that gives you a high bubble. They don't even care what it is. That's how bad it's got. And she concluded that our survey respondents were not only unclear about, but also apparently unconcerned about the specific chemical identity of the stimulant white powders they consumed. I think I've run out of time, so I'll finish off by just showing some of the trends in deaths from legal highs. Remember all the deaths from methadone? Well, there weren't that many. According to official Office of National Statistics, there were no official deaths from methadone till 2010, when there were 6. BZP, which is now banned, again, no deaths until recently, the last couple of years. GBH has a much higher death rate. I think I've run out of time, so I'll finish off by pushing my book, Tripology, which is available from Lifeline and covers lots of major hallucinogenic drugs. But I think the future for this kind of information is apps for smartphones. That's where it's at today for the kids. They don't go for information in books so much. And I think putting information about safer drug use on apps and smartphones and iPads and so on is the way forward for getting information about safer use of legal highs to young people, because the head shops can't do it. They'd lose, you know, the cops would shut them down if they told people how to use legal highs safely. Someone's got to do it, and I reckon apps for smartphones and so on are probably a good place for them.